extravaganza. Thank you for that. So I hope that a lot of you are able to join us next week on June 18th at 8 a.m. as we go into the field and map mussel beds. Here we can see on this map where folks have committed to going into the field. We have some wonderful partners in this work as well who are co-hosting sites. We have Seacoast Science Center, Schiller Coastal Studies Center, Friends of Casco Bay, Coag Bay Conservancy, and Royal River Conservation Trust. So if you're curious where they would be, I'll call out those sites at the end of the webinar with a link to sign up for fieldwork. So again, that's next Thursday, June 18th at 8 a.m. So our goal is to get out as many people into as many places as we can all at one time. So during your field work next week, you'll be part of a large effort of over 75 people who are going to be mapping mussel beds along the coasts of Maine and New Hampshire. But before we go into the field, we wanted to take this time together to build some background on mussels in the Gulf of Maine, go through some details of the community science project that you'll all be contributing observations to, and then have a chance for some Q&A as well. So a quick brief intro to who GMRI is and what we do. I should also introduce myself. I'm Abigail Long. I'm on our education team. I help run a lot of our community science projects. But GMRI as a whole, we're an independent, nonpartisan marine nonprofit that supports the Gulf of Maine ecosystems and the communities that depend on it. And our mission is to develop and deliver collaborative solutions to global ocean challenges. And so one way that we work towards this goal is through community or participatory science and collaborative research, both of which are represented in this mussel bed mapping project. So our plan for today is to build some background on mussels and mussel beds and mussel bed mapping in the Gulf of Maine, and then jump into the community science project that we'll all contribute to, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. Our team will be monitoring the chat, so anytime that questions come up, feel free to just throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carissa Maurin, who's our Aquaculture Program Manager, and Aaron Whitman, who's our Senior Research Associate in the Fisheries Ecology Lab. They're going to chat a bit about mussels and mussel bed mapping.
Great. Thanks, Abigail. Hi, everybody. My name's Aaron Whitman. I'm a Senior Research Associate, and I work in the Fisheries Biology Lab. So what we've been seeing is every time we talk about the intertidal zone, everybody always wants to know what happened to the mussels. They've seen them as kids. They've always remembered fondly of going to tide pools and looking at finding wild mussels. And so we can see here by all these different press clippings the shellfish are vanishing from the Gulf of Maine. Why are New England's wild blue mussels disappearing? And so we're trying to kind of investigate that, not necessarily in where they are where they are in the intertidal zone, but where they're kind of moving towards in the subtidal. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it to Carissa for these next couple.
Hi everyone, I'm Carissa Maurin, the Aquaculture Program Manager, and I just want to tell you a little bit about blue mussels. They're one of my favorite shellfish species because they're really cool. So blue mussels are actually an intertidal animal, and so this means that they can live underwater, but they can also be exposed to air for a limited time. And so that's what we consider that intertidal zone. It's the area that gets exposed during low tide, but then will be covered up during high tide. And so they have to be really resilient in order to handle the air temperatures and the lack of oxygen. And so they're really great at closing up super tight and creating basically a seal around them so that way they can keep their insides wet and moist. Blue mussels are experiencing multiple stressors in that intertidal zone currently. One of the main problems is the green crab. So this is an invasive crab that came over from Europe in ballast water years ago, and it has been increasingly moving up the coast, and it has been increasing in population as well. And one of their most favorite things for them to eat is juvenile shellfish. And they really like to live in that intertidal area. And so they have been eating a lot of our soft shell clams, but also our mussel populations. On top of that, with them being in that intertidal zone, being exposed to air, we've been having a lot more heat waves. So our oceans are warming, but we're also getting these air temperature heat waves that are happening during the summer summer times where temperatures can reach over 100 degrees. And so mussels are pretty resilient at withstanding certain temperatures outside of the water, but those extreme heat days on a low tide where they're exposed to can cause mass mortalities because they're unable to handle that heat stressor. And we have seen this happen on the West Coast where they primarily use intertidal aquaculture to grow oysters, and they had a huge mass mortality due to a heat wave there. Another thing that they're exposed to is extreme rainfall events. So again, if those mussels are exposed during a low tide and we have a lot of rain that happens in a short amount of time, mussels are actually, you can kind of call it allergic to fresh water. And so especially those juvenile mussels, if they get submerged in fresh water, it can cause another mass mortality event. So they're getting hit from a lot of different things in this intertidal zone. And so one of the things that we are hypothesizing is that the blue mussel beds may not be disappearing from those intertidal zones, but moving into the subtidal zone. And so this is deeper water that's not often exposed to the typical low tide. So you would only be able to view these mussel beds in a negative tide or extreme low tide. So they're not exposed to all these stressors at all of the time when as if they were in the intertidal zone. Next slide. So a little bit more about blue mussels and the Gulf of Maine ecosystem. Blue mussels are really important animals for our ecosystem. They are ecosystem engineers, we call them. This means that the nooks and crannies of the mussel beds create habitat for other species to live. So where you find mussels, you will 100% find other species that are living and thriving on those mussel beds. And these could be different algae, these could be periwinkles, these can be polychaete worms. And so they really do attract other animals to their mussel beds. They're also a keystone species, and that's because species rely on them as a food source. So they are a very valid part of our food web, and removing them can cause an ecosystem to collapse, basically, from a lack of food in that area. So they're a very important species for our ecosystems. They're also an ecosystem indicator species because mussels are super sensitive to environmental changes. So if mussel beds start declining, it really means that we should take a closer look at that ecosystem to see what is changing because they're one of the first species to sound the alarm that something is happening. And so we need to pay attention to them. Next slide.
All right, back to me. So if you're probably wondering if it's subtidal, you can only see them on these negative low tides. How do we monitor these mussel beds? And the way that we do that is through acoustic mapping. And so what acoustic mapping is, it's kind of shown here on this diagram, is that we're sending sound actively into the water column. It penetrates through the bottom and then comes back and gives us an echo of what that bottom looks like. And from that data, we can actually understand about and differentiate between different habitat types. So we can tell if it's just sand, mud, and then we can actually tell if it's shell hash or live mussel beds. And so using this technique, we go back at high tide and we do transect lines back and forth with acoustic mapping. I'll go a little bit over that in my approach, but it's important to note that our acoustics will let us differentiate between different class types. So go ahead, next slide. So our approach is we use our Simrad EK60 sounder, and it is not very technical, or it's not very it's definitely kind of low budget the way we have it right now because it's just on a 2x4 and it's on the skiff. And so we're going back over at high tide, and the reason we're using a 200 kilohertz transducer is it allows us to get really shallow. So you use this transducer for shallow water. It's pole mounted to our skiff, and we run these tight transects over mussel beds and the fringing habitat so we can get different classes. And so what we do with all that information, we collect all the data while we're out there, essentially mowing the lawn of the ocean, and then we get all that data back in-house, and we apply a habitat classification algorithm, and that's using our EchoView software. And from that, that'll give us like 6 classes, and then we go back and ground truth all of those classes with the submersible ROV. To kind of show you some of those results, we'll go on to the next slide. And so this is kind of what comes up. So our data generated the image on the right. And so that green area is all mussels, where all the gray are all they're different classes. But it's just kind of highlighting the mussels. And one thing that I wanted to show here is the differences between our acoustic results and the DMR historic shellfish bed map. So DMR, the main DMR made this shellfish bed map in 2010, and it actually shows the mussels on the other side of Mackworth Island. So originally, we thought that they might be there. And so you can see all of the gray lines in the right image showing areas that we went over, and there are actually no mussels there. So that's just showing that these mussels have shifted over to the other side of the island, where you can see that big green patch is the active mussel bed right now. So that's what we're doing. So historically, we've been using this shellfish bed map, and some of the sites that we're using that we're going at on the 18th, that is going to be using some of those sites as well. So it's definitely okay if there's a zero. Really, what that's doing is it's crossing off that spot that we don't have to check it, because it takes a long time to mow that lawn. So it's really crucial that even if you don't see mussels, that we still record that data. Um, so I think that's pretty much everything for those results, and happy to take questions when we get to the end of this presentation.
Awesome. All right, so we just got kind of a background on mussels, kind of what stressors they're facing, and then what we're doing here at GMRI. Obviously, we all don't have access to these technologies and these skiffs and things like that, but what we can do to help with this project is go out and make observations and collect data. So that's part of this mussel bed mapping community science project. You may be asking, what is community science? So community science is collaborative community-based research that engages members of a community to capture, analyze, and share information to assist in answering complex research questions. So you don't need much of a background or complex tools to participate, and it helps us to answer questions of both breadth and depth. And so we're able to go out to a lot of different places along the coast and really collect that detailed data using a lot of folks in their community. So in your community, you're the expert. You are in your community more than our researchers and have really important knowledge from either living there over time or just being there all the time. And you can inform others about the changes that you're noticing and really help us work towards solutions. So our goals of our community science projects are that participants are feeling connected to the natural spaces around them. So as you're out there, as you're collecting data, really feel and be in that place. You're identifying potential impacts of climate change and have the skills and resources that you need to address these threats. Engaging in authentic scientific inquiry. So we'll be following a data collection protocol together and asking questions and making those observations. And then our scientists and resource managers can receive this important data on changing ecosystems so they can understand where those mussels are. So in general, we have a community science platform called the Ecosystem Investigation Network. It's a GMRI platform where all of our projects are hosted. Currently, we have about 11 different active projects that cover a range of ecosystems. So we have both coastal, inland, forest projects, all focused on observing changes in the environment, and all with a number of different partners in our region. So today we're focused on our mussel bed mapping project, and it simply asks, where can we find mussels in the Gulf of Maine? So again, this came out from that need for more accurate information on where mussel beds are. We're hearing a lot of folks saying that mussel beds are disappearing, so we really want to investigate where they may be, and maybe that is in that subtidal zone. So we can't be everywhere during these negative low tides, which is why we really need your help to map where we're seeing these mussel beds. Again, you have your own knowledge of where things may be. You have your own knowledge of the land and the coast where you may like to go. So we'd love for you to share that with us so we can move forward in that effort to protect blue mussels. So to conduct field work, you must be at a rocky intertidal or mudflat during a negative low tide. And again, it's important that we're there at these negative low tides as we theorize that mussel beds are moving more subtidal. So at these low tides, we'll be able to see maybe the edge of those mussel beds and making sure that the most amount of land that we can see is exposed. So we have a list on our project page of all of the upcoming negative low tides for the year, and I'll follow up in an email with all of this information as well. So to collect data, fairly simple. Go down to the water line, walk along the water line looking for mussels. Another tip, if you can't get down to that water line, bring some binoculars and take a look through those binoculars to see where you might be seeing mussel beds. It's really important that you take photos of your site and of the mussels that you find. That way we can understand what we may expect to find. So again, this is to help Erin and Carissa go out and mow that lawn, look for those mussel beds. So having those photos, understanding exactly what they might expect to see is really helpful and important. So the required portion of this project is really go out and let us know if you see mussels. So checking yes or no. And then there are some optional questions as well to measure the average size of the mussel. Let us know how many mussels you're observing and then what kind of habitat you're making those observations in, and if you notice any predators. So to help with some of this data collection, we created some ID guides that you can bring out with you into the field to reference as you collect your data. All of this, again, can be found on the page, which we'll send. If you come out into the field with us next week, we'll have both the data collection protocol and the ID cards printed out for you. All right, so now we collect all this data. Now we have to contribute it. So you can see here there's two ways to contribute data, either as a group or as an individual. If you're coming out with us next week, we'll contribute the data as a group. And if you'd like to lead your own group, either next week or sometime in the future, you can use this option as well. Putting it simply, the group leader will create a trip and will be given generated passcodes. And each passcode corresponds to each data sheet and will be given to participants with their data sheet. And so this allows for those participants then to create or to contribute data without having to create an account. So you just enter that passphrase into this passphrase box, and then it will bring you to a digital data sheet. If you're going out as an individual, you would have to create an account on the Ecosystem Investigation Network. All that requires is an email, a username, and a password. And then you go into this Contribute Data tab, set your date and your location, and you add data. So both the individual data submission and the submission with a passphrase is going to bring you to this page, which is an electronic version of the data sheet that you will have printed out in the field. It's web-based and mobile friendly. So if there's service while you're out, you can totally submit right in the field. We recommend that you bring a paper protocol just because, technology might not be super reliable. So you can then go back and submit your data at home. For each question, there's a drop-down menu that has the same options as that paper data sheet, and you're able to add photos from your camera roll or from downloads. One thing I'll note is sometimes with iPhone photos, especially if they're live photos, the format is not compatible with this site. So I always just screenshot the photo and then can upload that screenshot. And definitely let us know if you have any problems with that, and we can help you troubleshoot as well. So once you've submitted your data, you can see it right in this table on that View Data tab. Here you can see all the past data that's collected by other folks. And I'll note that the exact location data is blurred to protect the location of the mussel beds and then to also allow folks to submit data on private property. So only a select few folks are able to see the exact locations, and we use this data with discretion. So if you're curious about data policies, we do have a data quality and management plan also linked on our site. So that's all the information about the community science project. And I just wanted to give a few notes about the event next week. So this is kind of how it's going to go. Low tide is at 8:18 a.m., but please try to get to your location at 8 a.m. You'll be met with your site host, and they'll give you a little bit of an intro, and then you'll get into data collection. And again, we'll have all those materials. So we'll have the printed out data sheet, we'll have the ID cards, we'll have pens and pencils for you to write with, and then we'll make those observations together as a group. Again, there's about 75 plus people who are going to be going out, so this is a really big effort, and really exciting to be a part of. So we'll try to keep up that energy when we're there all together. Um, Listed here are a couple fieldwork sites. I'll note where some of our partners will be. So Coag Bay Conservancy will be at Harpswell Town Office in Harpswell. Schiller Coastal Studies Center will be at their site on Orr's Island. Royal River Conservation Trust will be at Little John Island Preserve. Friends of Casco Bay will be at East End Beach, and Seacoast Science Center will be at their site at Ordeon State Park in Rye, New Hampshire. And then those other sites will be hosted by some GMRI folks, so you'll get a chance to chat with us as well. So if those sites call to you, feel free to sign up. I will send again that information at the end of this as well. And if none of these sites called you or you from somewhere else, you can totally collect data from your site as well. We really want data from all up the coast. Right now, we're kind of focused on Casco Bay because that's where our boat is and that's where we can easily get to, but we eventually would love to go and map in other places along the coast. So having this data as some baseline data that we can go back to and reference is really important. So site host will send more detailed information about your location. So where you signed up through that other event link, we'll make sure that you get all of that information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to your site host or myself, and we will make sure that we get those answered and get you ready for success for next week. Two important notes. Make sure that you wear boots or shoes that you don't mind getting wet and muddy. A lot of times we're going to be in mud flats, and you can sink pretty deep into a mud flat. So be ready for that. If you're worried about being on those mud flats or kind of mobility, we can also be closer to shore, bring some binoculars, and be able to see those mussel beds from further out. And we'll have folks at each of those locations ready to get in the mud as well and can, yell back that data if we need as well. So that's all of our information that we have. And now I want to open it up for any questions. Carissa and Aaron, if you have any other last words to add, go for it. I saw the chat might be a little active.
I'll just say that it's very exciting to see this many people interested in mussels and the project. So thank you all for joining.
You just wave to somebody.
Is
Yeah.
it possible? Is it possible to do any mapping, to use All Trails or some other map application as we're doing this?
Yeah, you can go out to your favorite trail and you can make observations from there. And yeah, you can use that to find a location for field work and then could submit through this project.
But the data we enter to you is just lat long or an area.
Yeah, okay. I'm understanding now. Yeah, so when you go to submit data, it'll take your location data. It is lat long, but there's also a little pin you can go in and pin at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There are two great questions in the chat about estimating the size of the mussel bed and the number of mussels. Do you want to go through the sort of categories that people will be looking for in terms of the number of mussels?
Yeah, so for number of mussels, we're going through uh, a few hundreds or thousands. And so we also have a version of the protocol that has some images to kind of explain that. But a few would be like a couple mussels we're seeing here and there. Hundreds were maybe like a couple clumps, and then thousands is like a really large mussel bed. And then same with size, there's a bit of a range of the size estimate. So I can pull up and find exactly what those are, but we'll bring some rulers as well to be able to do some measurements.
Yeah, the size is mostly if it's in like an established bed that has adult mussels, or if it's more of a juvenile, so just a fresh spat collection right there where they just are starting to settle down. So that's the size differences to tell those two differences apart. And then for the waders, I don't think you need any waders. I think just boots should be fine. And you do not need to have a frame. Like in the photo, that was for ground truthing at Mackworth Beach. So that was an earlier research undergrad student that was doing some more quantitative work. So no, we're not asking anybody to use a frame like in the photo, but that's a great question.
Yeah, and to estimate muscle size, something I do is like from the knuckle, the first knuckle on your thumb to like the tip of your finger is typically about an inch. And so you can kind of use that as like a rudimentary measuring technique if you don't have a ruler or measuring device with you. Another really great technique is to have something like string or yarn or dental floss that you can use and cut it to the length of that and then bring it home and measure it if you want to be very accurate.
As far as gloves, that's kind of a personal preference. I normally don't, but um, you're more than welcome to bring gloves. That way, if you see crabs or want to pick up a crab with gloves, you might be more comfortable that way. That's kind of a personal preference, though.
I just dropped in the chat the link to the project page, and so that has all this information on it as well. So it has that data collection protocol, as well as those ID guides and where you can find that list of the lowest high tides. And for this project, really, you don't need many tools. We really want to just know if we're seeing mussels or not. If you want to do more detailed observation and do those more detailed measurements, we'd really appreciate it. But also just going out and looking for mussels is very helpful.
And I just dropped the link to the DMR historic shellfish bed map in there. And so if you're not able to attend one of our pre-designated locations, you can use that map to look and see if there are any historic mussel beds in your area that you're trying to look for. And again, we've already documented shifts in these mussel beds since this. A lot of this map was created from conversations with fishermen, from kind of just collecting anecdotal information too. And so there is, a validity maybe issue with some of these site locations. So if you do go out and you don't see mussels, that's important for us because we then won't exert effort in that area. But what's also important to remember is that, we saw it shift to the other side of the island, so they didn't completely disappear. And so expanding your search site or, if there's multiple people in a group kind of spreading out and looking in different locations in the area would be beneficial because they may not be exactly in that same spot that the DMR historic shellfish bed map has, but they may have shifted to a slightly more western or eastern location compared to where you are at.
And then for this data collection, so this like BioBlitz we're just doing for this one day, but we're looking to replicate this data collection from individuals when there's a negative low tide, so really at your own convenience. And
And
I'm gonna no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for this data collection or this project in particular, um, you don't necessarily have to go back to the same site, week after week or month after month. We don't anticipate that we'll see that big of changes in that period of time. So more of like an annual kind of check back. But if you get the hang of this and then want to go to a different site, or you're just, at the coast somewhere and you notice some mussels, we love that data as well.
And then for how long we'll be counting out on the 18th, the water's going to come in fairly quick on us. So once we get there, we're going to want to go kind of to where the water's edge is, um, and really start looking there. But normally it won't be that long while we're out there counting. So it can be as short or as long as you want it to be.
Mhm. Yeah, I would imagine an hour tops for
Mhm.
that, as the max amount. But yeah, when the water comes in, it comes in quite quickly, surprisingly. And next thing you know, you're in ankle deep water that you had solid ground before.
And depending on the site, we'll send details of how far you may have to travel as well. Because some areas the parking's right at the water, some are a little bit further. So we'll make sure to send those details.
And since you have GMRI or a site host or both there, feel free to ask us questions about anything. We like to talk. So
Yes, we'll all be wearing GMRI designated shirts too, so you should be able to identify who the site leader is at the day of.
Do you have any other questions coming up? All right, well, that's it. I really hope to see everyone next week at the different sites. Really excited to get a lot of people out collecting data. If you can't make it to those sites, we'd still love to see your data from other areas, and definitely reach out if you have any questions. I'll follow up with all of this project information, and we'll make sure to follow up and get you all of those details for the sites that you are signed up for. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you
thanks
all
all.
for attending.